Let's face it, Macron's big new French strategy in Africa speech was always going to be about how Paris was going to maintain a foothold in Africa after being booted out of its traditional stomping grounds, so the Sahel region, where its stability and security and counterterrorism operations led to coups in places like Mali and jihadists running around with about as much discipline as French kids on a school break. Talk about terrorists. So African countries are increasingly opting for deeper cooperation with Russia and China as a result of basically France and the West's fiascos or increasing fiascos. And that makes Paris and the West in general really nervous. So now Macron has just announced that he suddenly does not believe in military contests between countries. I guess because France is losing on that footing in Africa, so he's just going to change the rules now. I mean, kind of like we did in preschool when we were playing games and we didn't like that we were losing. He basically said that Africa should not be reduced to grounds for a military measuring contest. So he's declaring a, quote, end of a cycle for France in Africa. France's military footing has been used by others, he says, to say that France only had a security agenda. So what is Macron's big idea now? Well, there was a clue that it was going to be about money when he made a positive reference in his speech. France's financial community of Africa's franc. So it was the currency that existed in France before the euro. He referred to it as one of France's big contributions to the continent. But here's what Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni said about the CFA franc in 2019.
This is a child who works in a gold mine in Burkina Faso. It's one of the poorest nations in the world. France prints colonial money for Burkina Faso, which has gold. In return, they demanded 50% of everything Burkina Faso exports ends up in the coffers of the French treasury. The gold that this child goes down a tunnel to extract mostly ends up in the coffers of the French state. So the solution is not to take the Africans and bring them to Europe. The solution is to free Africa from certain Europeans who exploit it and allow these people to live off what they have.
So that currency of 14 different African nations is printed in France, and it involves, or up until 2020, involved having 50% of its foreign exchange reserves of those countries based in an operational account in the Bank of France, and it's also pegged to the euro. And Macron said it was a great thing because it helped them get up to standards for investors globally. So now Macron wants to build on that, what he considers a wonderful symbol of French-African cooperation, which is quite controversial for a lot of Africans, especially with respect to sovereignty over their own currency, to focus on investments in healthcare, education, digital technology, sports, culture, small business, all backed by what he calls a European team. So here comes Team EU. He mentioned a desire to work with civil society in Africa several times. So all of this amounts to what is basically an innovative new concept. It seems that Macron has literally just discovered soft power. So instead of going into African countries under the pretext of helping with security and sticking around long after the situation gets even worse in hope of eventually scoring some natural resources, so basically the American model, Macron is now proposing to go in with footballs, French-style philosophical debates, maybe some Johnny Hallyday CDs, maybe some French art, and some cash for NGO workers who can serve as French influencers in the digital space probably, and on the ground, all for France. And with the hope that all of this might ultimately help to shake loose some sweet, sweet African resources. Presumably. Macron even said, quote, "We aren't going to do common good." And that he said you can't take people for imbeciles. He said that France is going to defend its interests, but also do it respectfully of Africans. Not sure how admitting that you're taking a different approach to manipulating them is being respectful and not taking Africans for imbeciles, but okay. Looks like Washington is also trying to see if it can be self-servingly influential by using sweetness and candy instead of bombs. Literally, that is what U.S. First Lady Jill Biden did recently in Namibia by giving out candy, M&Ms, to kids. Of course, all these investments that Macron talks about will ultimately benefit French firms in Africa. That's always been the case with U.S. and Western investments on the continent. But it seems like they're trying really hard to create this kind of PR-friendly good guy image of candy and rainbows, all whitewashing their militaristic, well, failed militaristic and background of militarism, all while kind of trying to portray Russia and China as the bad guys.